Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. We're just going to wait for a couple more people to join us. Great. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It's great to have you join us for the fourth installment of our student series. As you might have heard on the prior series, my name is Cindy Marty, and I'm part of the HR team who looks after graduate recruitment for BDO. And we're really excited to have you guys with us. I know many of you have just completed your exams and are on holiday now, so thank you for taking time out of your VAC, while others are still studying and still have your exams coming up. So we're wishing you the best of luck, and thanks for taking a study break and joining us today. If you've been on the webinars previously, you'll know that there's a Q&A box that you can type your questions in throughout the duration of the webinar, and we can get our guest speaker to answer them at the end. And yeah, I just wanted to share with you a bit more about BDO before we get started. So BDO in South Africa is growing rapidly. We now have 9 offices across the country with 140 different partners and directors across these offices. And we also have just over 1,700 staff at the last count we did. So we are a growing firm, and that's a big part because of the growth within the financial services and the financial services technology space. And so that's why it's really exciting to have Nevellan joining us to speak to us today about CAs of the future. So welcome, Nevellan, and thanks for being part of our webinar series.
Thank you, Cindy.
So Nev, tell me a little bit about how you got into a career in technology and what interested you in this field.
Okay, so growing up, I mean, just for the students to make it more relatable, I grew up in a very sort of typical Indian family household. And you had to either become a chartered accountant, a lawyer, or a doctor. And I think towards the later part, they started accepting engineers a little bit, right? So I was luckily very good at accounting, so I went down the accounting route. But I used to love playing with technology, and even during university, I really enjoyed my technology modules. And the day I qualified as a chartered accountant after passing my second board, my first move was originally from KZN in the Durban area. I packed my bags and I moved up to Johannesburg, and I started focusing on technology audits, specifically in the financial services space. And then, I then grew into a passion for emerging technologies quite early on in my career. And I think after getting experience in technology, I realized I could bridge the gap between finance and tech, which is getting bigger by the day because of the amount of technology that is now in our lives. And I think I've built quite a good niche in terms of being a CA within the actual technology environment, which allows me to bridge the gaps, but has also allowed me to accelerate my career because of scarcity within that specific field.
Yeah. And isn't it so wonderful that becoming a CA allows you to join your passion and your qualification, and it just opens those doors, which is awesome. And you're going to chat to us a little bit more today about what the future CA looks like, but maybe just give us a little intro as to what you feel the future CA looks like.
Okay, no, thanks, Cindy. So I think part of my job at the moment is part of my experience so far. So I've signed off across 4 of the big 5 banks in the country in terms of their IT audits and their systems. But part of my experience so far has also been working on due diligences and doing different types of exercises across new system implementations. Now, looking across financial services, or in fact any sector, the biggest capital spends that we are seeing from our clients at the moment are across IT systems. So to give you an example, it's not in financial services, it's not in the millions, it's in the billions.
Sure.
So if I can quote, I give you guys, everyone a quote, I would say in the next 3 years, you're looking at an 80 billion rand spend on technology across financial services in South Africa. And that's a big amount of money. And for anyone that's a chartered accountant or a financial manager or a financial director, those are key strategic projects that their probable futures, careers of not themselves, also their boards of directors is absolutely critical on. So your CA of the future needs to understand these technologies, understand how they contribute to an overall business model, understand how they impact strategy, finance, practically every area of business, and even taxes in terms of research and development grants. From an auditing perspective, how do I know exactly if there's a system? Because I think software is growing so big that intangible assets, which a lot of the more CA type students would have come across, is going to become incredibly difficult to audit. Because how do you value? I mean, if someone said to you, how much is Microsoft Excel worth? I mean, it could be 10 Rand to one person or 10 billion Rand to another person, which leaves technology as a very open space. And maybe a trend I've seen over the last 2 years, which is going to become even bigger going forward, is that chartered accountants' careers are going to be made or broken on how successful their technology implementations or their ability to engage technology is going to be.
Yeah, no, it's super important. And so what advice would you give to these students listening, either going into their articles or if they've just started or completed their articles, how do they go about learning more about tech to equip them better for this?
Also, a common joke I use when I present to the students is, I'm sure we've got a couple of people from BITS, maybe a couple from Stellies, or a couple from UCT, or whatever university you are in. Do not neglect the University of YouTube. It is one of the great learning resources that are out there, and just for everyone so that they know. So I was an early Bitcoin investor. I got in on Bitcoin at about 900 Rand a coin in about 2012, and it was based on videos that I watched on YouTube. I then built up a career, a really good career in explaining to boards and finance people how blockchain works and how Bitcoin works. And everyone asked, where did you learn about this from? And I learned it from the University of YouTube and from speaking and talking about people, because even up till today, the BSc computers and the BCom IT type degrees do not include any link to any of the emerging technologies. And it probably shows that our technology is moving way faster than what our education systems are. So if you are curious about something, make sure you do as much exploration as you can and use the benefit of the fact that we're living in the digital age. You've got probably 100,000 different types of encyclopedias just on your phone or just by having an internet connection. So just embrace that.
Sure, that's amazing. And so tell us a little bit about your views on the fourth industrial revolution and what impact you feel this is going to have on finance.
Also, I think COVID-19 has been something very interesting for me. It's still exciting, not the pandemic or the deaths, etc., but the no contact and the speeding up of digitization as we know it. Okay. And I think one of the things I've seen is that COVID-19's accelerated companies' digital strategies. So a lot of our clients that we speak to and a lot of customers or organizations that you see across the country, the ones that were really well digitized, I'd have to reference Takealot as an example, or even maybe OneCart or Zulzi as well. They have done incredibly well because they built infrastructure that was digital in nature and their revenues are spiking. And then if I cross-reference that to other clients that didn't have a digital strategy, I'd say 60% of them, their businesses don't exist any longer post the lockdown because they've been taken over. And I think fourth industrial revolution is how do all of these technologies come together and work together to make human life better? But with all of these technologies coming together comes a new type of risk, something that we've coined the term emerging technology risk. And it's probably going to become the largest risk for any organization in the world to manage. And as chartered accountants who come from a risk management type background, in order to remain relevant, I think every chartered accountant is going to have to be able to talk about emerging technology risk and how it's linked to the fourth industrial revolution.
Sure, no, that's great. So Nev, I'm going to hand over to you for the next slide and you're going to chat to the students from there.
Sure, thank you, Cindy. Okay, so Cindy, maybe if we can go back just one slide. Okay, so let me just do a brief introduction for all of the students. So my name is Nevellan Moodley. So I'm a partner in the BDO Financial Services Technology Division, and look after, I actually head up the Financial Services Technology Division. Part of my experience so far is that I'm currently leading a team of 33 people across Johannesburg and Cape Town in terms of integrating technology across the Financial Services Division. Our sort of specifics and our key areas are that we employ chartered accountants as well as IT risk professionals with a BCom IT type degree. And we try and focus as far as possible on large financial services organizations, or actually any financial services type organization. And I've had the privilege of working in the fintech division or the fintech area in the South African economy for the last 5 to 6 years. So I embrace young culture in terms of young startups, and especially in the tech space, female-based tech startups, which I think have a lot of value and a lot of benefit to bring to the South African market. And I think part of that experience is everything technology. I love, and I have a real passion for emerging technologies and how we can use emerging technologies to disrupt the accounting and auditing profession as we know it. But I also have a great interest and passion in terms of how digital technologies impact broader businesses and what are the business cases and what are the risks that come out as a result of that. So with starting up any business, so we've been in the financial services game at BDO now for the last 15 months. And coming from a chartered accounting background, there's not many of us that are sitting at a partner level that are looking after technology per se. And one of my passions is actually lecturing to students in terms of the IT audit modules, impacts of emerging tech, and what the future auditor looks like, almost sessions like these. And I think the key benefit is that a lot of chartered accountants, from my knowledge, so I've worked with lots of chartered accountants and IT professionals in the last 10 years. And the thing that scares most chartered accountants is I technically don't know how technology works. And I'm going to leave you guys with a comment that was passed to me very early on in my career, is that a lot of people don't know the ins and outs of how the internet works. No one knows about TCP/IP, how the protocols work. And I've had to ask even probably people that are making lots of money on the internet, how exactly does the internet work? They probably wouldn't be able to answer me because they actually don't know the deep technical detail of how the internet works. But that being said, it hasn't stopped them from making money on the internet. And I think if you take that as a focus area and you say, okay, how do I understand how technology impacts business? Now, that's where it starts to become very specialized, and a lot of people, it's a really difficult skill based on my experience with some of the grads. And majority of the time, it's just a subconscious block that's stopping you from embracing new types of technologies because you believe you need to know how to code. So the beauty of it is I learned how to code. I don't think any development house in this country would want to employ me because the way my logic is structured is not the best, but it's definitely not a core skill that you require. And that being said as well, you can learn how to code on using so many different digital apps where you can actually go on courses and learn how to do it. It ultimately comes down to logic. So I think key message, the key skill to technology is you don't need to be technical in it. You need to understand how it impacts business and have an open mind. And the one message I must leave all the students with today is that, so as I've grown in my career, I've started to appreciate psychology a little bit more. And there's 3 different things that make us up as human beings, okay? IQ was something that was really big in the 70s all the way to the early 2000s probably. You've then got something called EQ, which great leaders always have great EQ or work on their emotional intelligence, almost called your emotional quotient. And your IQ is your intelligent quotient. And then you got the third one, which is something that's a new field of study called AQ, right? And AQ stands for your adaptability quotient. And for a lot of our students, and even for myself, I think exponential technology in the world we live in is something where we need to be adaptable as human beings. But I think for the next generation coming through, I don't think there's full appreciation in the world for how adaptable they are going to have to be. So to give you an example, when IT systems came out for the first time, let's call it early 70s, late 80s, where it actually came out, it took about 25 to 35 years for systems to be fully embedded in organizations and in everything that we do. And that was one change that probably our parents would have lived through, where they just had to get used to systems. I mean, that was a huge change compared to paper-based environments all the way through now to systems. And what the predictions from technologists are, and I've seen it in real life, is that that change, or that impact of change, in our lifetimes, we're going to see it happen every 3 to 5 years, that degree of change. Which means the one message we leave everyone with, even for those of you that are studying, you're going to hate me for giving you this message, but the message is very simple. You're going to have to forget everything you learned in the last 5 years and relearn something new. And if you're going to have an average career of 30 to 35 years, whatever you decide it's going to be, it means you're going to have to do it 7 times. So if your parents did it once, you're going to have to do it 7 times. And look, the world works survival of the fittest. So the ones that are capable of adapting quicker than the others will probably be more successful. And look, having access to a couple of chartered accountants who are in their 40s or their late 40s, I see 2 different types, one that is very adaptable and one that's not. And when you start seeing chartered accountants getting retrenched at organizations, it's not because that there's no need for a chartered accountant there. They haven't adapted their skill set with the time and they've become irrelevant. Now, that time frame that it used to take you to get irrelevant used to be maybe 20 years. And what I'm seeing now, which is very scary, is that it now can happen in 5 years. Because just maybe to bring it closer to the accounting situation, and I'll bring it closer to auditing later, well, on the webinar as well. Imagine if they built artificial intelligence that could work through an accounting standard. Let's take IFRS 16, which most of you would have studied. And if we built an artificial intelligence solution that crunched that standard and was able to apply it to any lease and be able to, effectively do the disclosures automatically, what exactly would be the need for a chartered accountant who at the moment prides themselves on being able to prepare financial statement information? Your career could be disrupted by technology incredibly quickly, and then you'd probably need to go to the next value chain to say, I can actually read the data and analyze it and be able to do something like that. So I think that constant need to change is going to have to come from inside of you. And I'm not going to do what my lecturers did to me when I was in university, where they said, after you become a chartered accountant, you've made it. For me, the day you become a chartered accountant is the day the actual real hard work starts. And I can tell everyone on the call with not an ounce of doubt, I worked far harder early on in my career than I ever did in university. And it's what I had to do in order to remain competitive, and maybe the right word to end off with, remain adaptable. Okay, so Cindy, can we go to the next slide? And look, the slide in front of you, I'm going to tell you these are types of technology. So let me just explain the concept to you. And part of my career means that I work with a lot of chartered accountants or trainee accountants that are coming through the pool. And it gives me such a laugh that someone that studied a 4-year degree and probably finished their board 1 exam, and I love then sending them out to a client to go and audit a robot. And I'll share the case study with you so that you can see it. So a person was doing an audit for me at a unit trust type environment, where what they had to do was they had to tick from an application form that comes through from a client through to a system. So what used to happen was the form used to come through saying, I want to invest in 100,000 units of a specific trust at a specific value. And then the auditor would come in, select an item, and then go through. Well, it used to be captured manually previously. And then the client used robotics-based technologies to capture from the application form all the way to the system. So as we have first year and second year auditors, they went out to the client and they said to the client, we would like to do a walkthrough of the client application form onboarding process. And the client said, well, the lady who used to do that job, she is now retired. She no longer works with us. And the trainee naturally said, okay, so who's taken over from her job, because we'd like to speak to her. And the client then said to the trainee, well, it's a robot. His name is Alex, and he does it now. He does the whole capturing process. And they're like, okay, how do we set up a walkthrough with Alex? I stress again, or how do I speak to Alex? And the client said, well, Alex is coded in a language called, what was it at the time, Blue Prism, and he speaks in Blue Prism, so if you want to, you better be able to speak Blue Prism. And the trainee was completely baffled, did not know what they were going to do. And look, I did set the client up in advance to just do it as a case study for myself. And here comes trotting back the trainee to the manager saying, the client says that this person doesn't work here any longer, so I can't use last year's working paper. It's not going to work. And they want me to set up time with the robot to understand how this thing works. And they're like, I don't know how to do this. I think the client's being difficult. They just don't want to share the information with me, or they want to waste my time. And it was on the back of that. This was as early as 2016, 2017. And I know for a fact, I doubt there's anything about auditing robots in anyone's auditing textbook on the call today. And we came up with this concept of an emerging technology toolbox. And look, you don't need to know all of these different types of solutions that are out here. Most of you have probably heard about it, but APIs, artificial intelligence, blockchain, chatbots, cloud computing, you name it, it's out there. And what we actually did was, I worked with, and my team worked with a number of deep technology specialists who were then able to come together and build risk frameworks in order to help auditors, in conjunction with IT auditors and chartered accountants, work together to build frameworks in terms of how to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence in environments that are technology enabled. So back to the trainee story, we built this framework and then went out and did the audit of the robot and was then able to conclude on a control in order to give audit evidence. And it was, again, you had to be quite adaptable to put something together, and I built a career on being adaptable, so it was a great thing. But if the auditing textbook doesn't have it, there's no risk frameworks approved by anyone. It just means technology is moving so fast that you can't say these are the rules. We need to make up the rules as chartered accountants. And I think as risk people, or people involved in risk management, we need to be open to how we manage new types of risks. So I'm just going to share one without going into too much of detail. The robot has a password in order to access the system. Now, if the robot has it, what if a human got the password, logged in as a robot? They would be able to do anything and then blame the robot. Now, that's not written in any textbook or any framework, and it's our responsibility as professionals. And the CA background, that's where it helped me a lot, was to be able to understand what are the risks that could come out, and then working with deep technology people. And the problem with this wheel is that this wheel won't last for the next 3 years. It'll probably last for the next month until more technologies come out and more other types of technologies come out, where we're going to have to continue building and rolling out at rates probably never seen before in this world. And this becomes very important for everyone that's going to be coming out of articles in the next sort of year to 2 years. If the market is spending 80 to 100 billion on technology transformation, how are you as an auditor going to be able to audit in environments that have all these technologies? Okay, and that's a very important thing. And you might say, oh, how does all of these technologies impact business? Well, I can tell you, I can even use examples for you. I'll give you a financial services example and a non-financial services example. IoT. Most of you, or some of you, should have some sort of device on your hand tracking your steps, etc. Okay, if the number of steps you do, if a person who does 10,000 steps a day is healthier than a person who does 2,000 steps a day, and it feeds into an insurance actuarial model, which ultimately drives your insurance provisioning, as auditor, we need to then be able to audit the technology that's feeding the data of the number of steps, because if the person who walks 2,000 is now feeding in 10,000, the actuarial modeling is wrong. And then you ask the question, so how do I hack my Apple Watch or my Fitbit? How do I put more steps on it if I wanted to? And now something as simple as a Fitbit is driving financial reporting. And it's just about having that insight and that oversight to say, okay, how exactly do we respond to these risks? But what we are seeing across corporate South Africa is that because the risk policies that exist at the moment don't talk about governing a person's Fitbit, it's a risk that's ignored that could potentially lead to massive issues down the line. And it's our responsibility as the next line of chartered accountants and risk professionals coming into corporate South Africa to start providing these insights to our clients. And one of the things that, so this is for what clients end up doing, or what different types of audit clients are implementing. They're implementing all of these technologies in their environments, and we need to respond as chartered accountants to this. But then we look at something a bit different, which is actually, how do we use emerging technologies to make an audit better? And I promise you, I might take an auditing textbook and throw it out of the window if it still talks to a check and a check register. I've got news for everyone that writes that procedure down. The auditing textbooks do not mention and do not talk about, well, our current clients do not have checks. I've never seen a check at a client for the last 5 years, but I know the auditing textbook says it, and I know if you write down, inspect the check register in your auditing exam, you probably get one tick and you're like, yeah, I'm closer to becoming a chartered accountant. And it just really upsets me. Sorry, that's just one of my bugbears. So my point is that what you learn in your textbooks already, see adaptability. You need to forget a little bit about it when you join the profession and start thinking about more, what are the different types of technology risks? And these technologies are so critical that they're not actually technology risks, they are key business and audit risks. Like, and I'll ask all of you, if I had to set a board exam paper, I would love to do a case study on how you would audit Uber. That would be incredibly interesting, and I think it would probably, I'd probably have people out to murder me for setting a question like that in terms of what are the solutions and what are the answers that come out. But start challenging yourself already and saying, I'm learning all of this stuff about auditing. Let me be that student who puts my hand up and says, well, how would you do this at Uber? Just a thought to put out there. So one of the things that we look at doing is how do we integrate emerging technologies into our audit offering? So meaning, if the traditional way of auditing something is to audit a sample of 15 or 25 items, how do I use technology to be able to audit all? So at this point, let me reference a use case for you. So in 2016, 2017, I rolled out one of the first robotics-based auditors where it was a robot that did the audit. Now let me share with you the pros and cons of this. The normal auditor took 2 days to audit 25 payments, 25 foreign currency payments done by a human auditor at a second year level. Took them 2 days to cover their 25 payments, do their working papers, their tick mark legends, etc. We built a bot. We didn't name her or him, which we should have done, but now that I think about it, our bot in one evening, a run of 13 hours, was able to audit 288,000 payments versus a normal auditor doing it at 50, right? The robot auditor was able to find the 13 exceptions in the population overnight, and the normal auditor who tested 25 had no findings, no issues. So everything worked, whereas we found the 13 that had an issue. The second year auditor then took the exceptions and went to the client, and the client exclaimed, how did you know that, how did you pick these ones? And like, no, we didn't. We just audited them all, right? And if you look at corporate South Africa and what's happening, there's a desperate need for higher levels of assurance to be applied, a term that I coined as maximum assurance. And if you can do give maximum assurance and do it at the same price you are doing it at the moment, we can actually really add value and increase trust in the auditing profession. And I think from everyone on this call would know, if you look at what's happening across the audit organization, well, of the audit profession, especially in South Africa, it's in desperate need for a boost of trust. We almost need to regain our mantle as being the leading trust providers in the professional world. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. How do we use technology to even provide more and more trust? And I always tell people that a human may lie to you. Technology never lies. It's only the humans that control them that will lie. So the more you take humans out of your trust process, the higher the likelihood that you're going to be able to give higher levels of trust to people that are using your items. So what I want to show you next, I'm sure you guys are ready now to see, what does a robot auditor look like? Let me show you. It's actually not that complicated. I'm going to get Cindy to play a video for you, and if there is sound, I will let the sound play and then explain it. If there's no sound, I will explain what it's doing as we're going through. Okay, I'm just going to leave it as that, and then I'll talk through it. The sound was just music, so you don't need to worry. But this is a robot operating. It's scanning in an application form, as you can see in front of you. And that's a robot actually extracting information off a PDF, ID numbers, bank account details, addresses, as you can see there, amounts and sums to be invested. And if you look at the corner of the screen, that's the robot working. That's not a human, that's a robot working. And if you look at what it's done, is it's got the PDF on the left and the Excel on the right, and it's actually comparing document to document automatically. And there you go. It's then showing you how many items it's audited and the results. Okay. Thank you, Cindy. You can just actually pause it on the screen right here. So the power of this, and I know that was quite quick, and you can pick it up on the video when we publish it a little bit later as well. But the power of this technology is that if you think about what the auditor would do here in a manual environment is, they would take the client's manual form, which is an investor's form, and they would then go get it and tick it up to the system to say that it agrees. So if the bank account details are there, they would agree it. The person said they're going to invest 500,000 in a specific trust, they would agree it. And you're going to go paper by paper by paper because you've got a PDF document on this side and a system on this side. So what this solution is doing is that the robot is taking unstructured data effectively, which is a PDF image, and it's converting it into structured data, aka an Excel type environment, and then it's using that as a basis to compare to a system in order to almost simulate the procedure that an auditor would do. The difference with the robot is that firstly, it doesn't need to take a break. It doesn't do lunch breaks, it doesn't do supper, it doesn't do breakfast. They don't belong to a union. They work 24 hours a day. They don't need a break, and they will not make an error no matter how tired they are. Okay, and those are key things from a technology perspective. That means from an audit perspective, as audit partners tell me all the time, their audit risk starts to go down. So the risk of an auditor making an error goes down tremendously, right? The disadvantage of a robot is if that robot is built wrong or does the wrong procedure, it will do the wrong procedure in the wrong way over every single transaction, and you could potentially miss an issue if you don't build it right from the start. So therefore, for those of you reading ISQC1, go and ask your lecturers why it doesn't talk to testing technology specifically and what should be your quality control procedures be over audit solutions that are rolled out into the market. The lecturers are going to hate me for asking these questions, but I think they're very, very valid for the profession. So I've tested an audit solution and I know it works. I compared to what a human came out to. I'm then suddenly sitting in a much better place than where I was previously. Okay, so that's one example. That's very simple. We just took robotics solutions, which are available for free online, most of them, and we were able to clearly articulate the audit problem. And we were then saying, okay, if we integrate technology, this is how it would speed up the entire process for us to be able to perform the audit. So you had to have audit skills, you had to have technology skills, and you had to have an understanding for how the two merge together in order to provide sufficient appropriate audit evidence. And then finally, you needed to put a working paper together to say, this is how you considered all of your risks, and this is how you're comfortable that you've got the right level of assurance for what you were trying to do. Which I think is, I'll just pause there and think about it. When you're answering your auditing exam the next time, think about it. If somebody asked you, how would I audit a robot? Just forget about the technology and start thinking about what could go wrong, and you'll get the risks. After you get the risks, you can then probably start advising in terms of what the controls should be in an environment like this. Okay, and then one of my most exciting projects, which I used as a test case, was drone technology. And you might say, what does drones have to do with auditing? Okay, and I personally love playing with drones. I used to play with them. I've flown them around a few times. I've crashed too, and they broke to pieces, which I'm not proud of, but all part of the learning. And what we saw was, so without mentioning a specific client, I'm just going to reference it for you. We had a client and we wanted to test the technology. And again, I'll reference second or third year audit trainees. Some of them finished their board 2 exam, had to go out and count 42,000 sheep and 50,000 cattle. Okay. Now imagine, I mean, a lot of you on the call today, you didn't spend that amount of time studying to go chase sheep around a farm and count them, right? And you know, they move, animals move. It's something that, again, a lot of people don't factor in. So when you're trying to count them and they all look the same, you could miscount them. And on this specific client, we had about 600 or 700 differences to client counts at any point in time. And it used to take them 2 weeks to get through the volume of different sheep and cows, because it was very difficult in order to whittle your differences down. And we then said, okay, we need to do this count, and I want to do it in an hour. I want to go out there, because now suddenly you're charging a client for 2 weeks worth of time to count sheep, using chartered accountants to count sheep. It just does not make sense. Okay, so what we did was we engaged with the drone company, and we said to them, can you take a picture in the air of all of these different sheep? Okay, and again, think about it, existence of inventory effectively for a farm, right? That was the test we were doing. And I'm just going to get Cindy to play us the next video, and I'll tell you what we did. So these are one of the use cases. So if you go to a mine, again, you don't need to go to a mine. You're going to be safe. And if you're looking at this, I mean, the drone is effectively taking pictures of an overall, of a mine. So effectively all of the resources that are sitting in this mine, they need to be valued. They sit on the balance sheet of the specific mine. And as an auditor, I mean, how are you going to count that? You could probably get an expert to help you, but after gathering all of these images, which the drone is doing for us, so the drone goes out and grabs all of the pictures of the different stockpiles, etc. And we then use machine learning techniques to analyze the data coming out of the pictures, and we are able to get the most accurate view in terms of getting a value or quantity of the different stockpiles that exist. And I'm just going to let it play through, and then I'll give you some. I think we could be done. Yeah, you can pause it there for me, Cindy. Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It'll just let it play through to the end. Perfect. You can pause it there for me. All right. So I was telling you about the sheep, and then I'm going to tell you about the mining now. So our drone went into the air and snapped pictures of all of these sheep and cattle across this farm. It took them probably just under an hour to get the pictures. So effectively, we now were at a point where we had images collected from the sky of all of these sheep and cattle. We then built a machine learning algorithm that we taught how to count off a picture what a sheep was and what a cow was. So we just taught it. We highlighted a sheep and said that's a sheep. We highlighted a cow and said that's a cow. And then using that learning, the technology was able to go through, count all of the sheep and all of the cattle. And our numbers were the most accurate numbers we've provided to the client in the last 40 years that they've been in existence. We had not a single difference. The entire stock count was conducted, executed, and documented in 1 day from a previous 2.5-week engagement. The time spent was a lot less, it was a lot cheaper, and we gave a higher level of assurance. That, for me, is the benefit of using technology on an audit. Okay. The video I showed you today was of a mine that we used the technology on, and it was actually the client that was using drone themselves to value their own stock. And they said to us, okay, how are you going to do this? Because we get all these images from a drone, we then analyze the images, and we get to this valuation, which goes into the financial statements. So linked to our emerging tech toolbox that I spoke to you guys at the beginning about, we're able to build a drone risk assessment framework, because now that I'm a tech guy, I need to come up with acronyms at the drop of a button. So DRA, Drone Risk Assessment, which doesn't exist in any textbook, so don't quote me. And we were then able to audit the client's drone, and we were able to then get analyze how their technology was analyzing the pictures to get to a valuation, and then be able to conclude on the final valuation. And because it was such a significant risk, we actually got our own drone company to do independent flights, because we couldn't just trust the client's drone. We did independent flights, built independent models and independent machine learning algorithms that were then able to compare our results to the client's results and be able to challenge management in terms of how their drone was gathering images as well as how it was analyzing images. Now, no auditing textbook talks about how you're going to analyze images coming from a drone. And that, again, is linked to the point around adaptability. And this is one of the big things that I do for a living, is how do we use technology to make our lives as auditors and accountants better? I've got use cases I could show you for the next 4 or 5 hours. I could show you different types of ones and link it back to accounting and auditing standards. But one of the last ones that I was working on earlier today is we've built a solution now that can scan lease PDF documents. It can then automatically populate into an IFRS 16 model that automatically does journal entries for each year end, as well as example disclosures, which are compliant with IFRS 16 at any point in time that you select. So for all of you that are out there busy going through your textbooks and figuring out how to master IFRS 16 and doing lease straight lining, etc., we've literally got technology where you can just feed in the paper, which is the lease contracts, and it gives you disclosures at the end. Think about the impact that has on your career if you say, I can do lease straight lining, and I would say to you, well, our BDO robot can also do lease straight lining and can probably do 500,000 leases a day compared to the 6 that you will be able to do. I think I cannot stress for everyone in the room enough, adaptability is critical. Okay, but yeah, I think I'm gonna give my voice a little bit of a rest now until we get some questions. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And I think, Cindy, we can move to some questions.
Great. Thanks, Dave. A couple that have come through. So Yusuf has asked, what will set us humans apart from robots in this new age of technology?
So that's a very good question. And I know we just spoke about 4th Industrial Revolution. We're now talking about the 5th Industrial Revolution, which not many people talk about, which is like us as human beings, there's a human touch element that comes to it, right? And what sets us apart from the technologies is providing that personalized experience, but not as we know it at the moment. So for example, I can crunch all the data on someone, for example, on how to make a credit decision. But ultimately, it's a human that will look at it at the end and then be able to advise. So I think while technology can enable us, I don't think we must let the technology take over our lives and take over our worlds and start making our decisions completely. I think they must guide us with a lot of information that we have, not to spend so much of time, but still understanding that this is a human world. And in order for us to be a human world, the organizations I feel that will be the most successful going forward are the ones that are capable of actually saying, how do we put the human touch at the right spaces to drive customer centricity and be able to still provide a personalized experience, but without losing that human touch? Because you can only talk to Siri for so long before you get bored.
Well, my 4-year-old can talk to Siri for hours. All right, then there's another question from Malcolm. Which emerging technology do you think will be the most prevalent in audit in the near future?
So I think the most prevalent technology for me is going to be technologies in unstructured data, but if I can reference specifically robotics. I think the ability for robots or just very basic digital type technologies to do very basic tasks, because as it stands right now across the auditing profession in South Africa, I'd say auditors probably spend, if I'm kind to them, 70% of their time gathering information, 20% documenting, and if you're lucky and they've still got that last bit of energy at the end of the day, 10% actually analyzing. I think robotics can get you to a point, if you've got a lot of foresight and strategic input early and upfront, where you could actually free up auditing clerks or auditing trainees to be able to spend 70% of their time actually analyzing, 10% getting it, and maybe 20% documenting it, which will make auditors more efficient. But for me, in the short term, I think robotics is probably one of the most key technologies for driving higher levels of audit assurance at far more reasonable prices if I do add on myself.
Okay, great. Then another question is, to join BDO, what do I need to have in terms of academics, but also everything besides the academic side of things? So the one word that I'm hearing from you is to be adaptable. What else would you recommend that students have to be able to join our team?
So in my team at the moment, CA professionals, I think one of the differences and the benefits of our business is that we set up as one financial services business. So in our financial services business, different to our competitors that will have an audit, a tax, an advisory, and a different division, in financial services, our division is called financial services. We've got the audit, we've got the tax, we've got the technology, we've got the actuaries, you've got the sustainability, we've got everything all sitting all together. And one of the skills I look for specifically is curiosity. How much are you trying to make a difference in the world, and how keen are you doing it? But self-learning. I mean, you can lead a horse to water as far as you can, but you can't make it drink. And my sort of philosophy is that I'll give you everything. I'll give you access to be able to learn as much as you can and frame it with experience and lots of soft skills. But for me, that hunger, that passion, and that energy is absolutely critical, especially for young people coming through, to be absolutely so driven by what they're doing and so excited about what they're doing. And I think the last thing is your ability to have fun doing what you are doing. If this is going to be your career, I can tell you it's my career. And if I did have to make all of my career choices purely on financial gain, I probably wouldn't be here because there's just other companies or other types of professions that pay a lot more. But for me, one of the things I love about my career is interacting with the young people that are coming through, hearing their ideas, having them challenge me being able to challenge them. So that hunger, that passion, and the energy, and ultimately your adaptability as well, which in most of interviews that I have with people, you can pick up within an hour what their sort of views are around these types of things.
We've got a whole bunch of questions coming through here, Nev, some good
Oh, I
ones.
love it.
The one student asked, which topics would you advise aspiring CAs to start researching on the University of YouTube?
University of YouTube. So one thing I didn't talk about specifically in my presentation was cybersecurity. Every single chartered accountant that comes out for the next year, the next few years, in fact, for the rest of humankind, will have to know about cybersecurity. And you don't need to go into the details or anything specifically. You need to, so what I'm often faced with in my career is I need to sit in front of a board of directors or an audit committee. Your audit committees are generally older type of people with a lot of experience. And any client that I speak to at the moment, what is your number one risk, or specifically in financial services? I get the answer, cyber, because a cyber attack could take out some of the large clients that we know. And I'm being able to explain and articulate to an audit committee who are responsible for, or a risk committee who is responsible for managing and mitigating a risk, being able to explain the risks and controls around cybersecurity are critical. But how do you make a Fitbit hack-proof versus how you make a server hack-proof are very different concepts. So for me, the thing that I would look at is almost understanding cybersecurity, understanding what hackers are doing, understanding how cyber attacks work. I think that's one example. And then any emerging technologies. I would start by watching a video on the top 20 tech trends for the next 3 years as an example, or the top 10 tech trends. Select 2 or 3 and say, look, every day I'm just going to watch a video or do some Googling or research on what the specific technology is. And what I would then say is, which businesses are using this technology and what are they using it for? And then there's a whole lot of use cases on YouTube for each one. And then based on that, the ones that I really have, how I would then select what I want to do is, the one that I'm really interested in, where it's actually not taking a lot of effort from me to learn about it, where I just have a passion to want to do it, I will then just carry on and watch it. So with me, it was Bitcoin early on and blockchain early on in my career. I just really, I loved the concept. And before you know it, I'd watched like 15 hours of videos, one after the other. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm learning it finally. But I didn't have to write an exam or anything about it. I just had to talk to people about it, and I really loved it and enjoyed it. So that's how I would select what to do.
Great. Then there's a question saying, will auditing come to the point of being static because of robots?
Yeah, very good question. So I've had the pleasure of engaging with people who work at Google, Facebook, and Amazon on this. I mean, if you look at what those companies are doing, I mean, look, some people say they're actually not that big innovative. Like somebody said to me the other day, like, what real innovation has Facebook done in the last 3 years? Name me one thing. They've become a big organization now. They're not really innovating. But for me, the auditing profession as it stands, a friend of mine at Google said to me, he's like, we could disrupt the entire audit market if we really wanted to, but the margins are not there. And why would we want to go into something so high risk as becoming an auditing firm where we're going to take on risk, the returns are not that good? Because the view from him is if we sucked in all the data across the world and from the client as well, because we know how to process data in volumes, we could theoretically do the whole audit using just purely technology based, but they don't believe the margins are going to be there. I think around auditing becoming static, I think with clients' environments changing as fast as they are, and look, I'll reference this one specifically, Elon Musk wants to connect different types of like wires or cabling into human beings' brains onto their cerebellum. You can research the company, I think it's called Neuralink. You can have a look at it. Think about that. If you had human beings that were connected, had their brains connected to the internet, where they automatically did certain things based on a program running off a computer in their brain. I don't even know how you would audit that, but that sounds pretty exciting to try figure it out. So no, I don't think it's going to remain static. I think maybe to the contrary, I think you're going to see changes and risks coming out so quickly that in a year, I mean, an audit that you're going to do for a year-long period, you might audit 3 different businesses all in the same year because they've had to transform so quickly in order to stay up to speed with technology.
So Nev, Malcolm asks, how do you think blockchain or decentralized ledgers will change our industry?
Oh, beautiful question. So blockchain for me and distributed ledgers. So look, having spent a lot of time lecturing and coaching people to understand the technology, it's actually very simple for all the accountants in the room specifically. Blockchain allows you to create trust between two parties that do not trust each other. Okay, and it does it through consensus mechanisms, which is a very big word, but it's effectively mathematical problems where if left is equal to right, then true. If left is not equal to right, then false, right? And then you start looking at the auditing profession and you're like, okay, so if we took the whole world and put everything onto a blockchain and we said, okay, cool, now we have the whole world on a blockchain, we have an auditor. The auditor creates trust between capital markets, the companies, and all of the different stakeholders in order to maybe generate funding or justify funding, etc. But the role of the auditor is to provide trust. But if the technology is already providing the trust, then why do I need an auditor? So I think blockchain is one specific, and distributed ledgers is one specific technology that could fundamentally change the world we are living in, because it's going to take the power away from huge central third-party organizations. So just for everyone to be aware of, as you've got banks, you've got insurance companies, you've got governments. The reason why they exist is because we trust them as trusted third parties. Won't have the political discussion with any of you, but that's just the view in terms of it. And with blockchain being in place, do you still need an auditor? Would the role of an auditor be completely different? There's some research papers coming out now which are very interesting to me when I read them. So yeah, I think it will look very different, and I think the role of the auditor, I think it'll still be there. It will just be so different compared to what we know today. Maybe to explain how different it would be, take your entire auditing textbook. As you're driving down the freeway, just chuck it out, and you'll probably need a brand new textbook to be written.
Those books are expensive. Don't do it just yet. Do it next year. Okay, Nev, I think we've got time for one more question. There are a couple more, but we can always contact the students directly afterwards. So Hope asks, comparing with international varsities, how far behind are South African varsities in preparing accounting students for 4IR, in your opinion?
Okay, so the accounting program, so this is a view based on some studies that I've picked up from BDO globally and chatting to the different global countries, well, the different countries in our global network. So the South African Chartered Accountant is the most technical chartered accountant that exists out there when it comes to financial reporting. So across the world, if you want a chartered accountant to prepare your financial statements, then you call a South African chartered accountant, because they will do the best job in the entire world. That's the UK, Australia, and the US. They absolutely love CA essays. The British feedback to me and the Australian feedback, if you want a chartered accountant to run your business, the last CA that you find is one out of South Africa, because they will run that business into the ground, because the business and entrepreneurial skills taught as part of the degree are very limited, and they're not exposed to it because they're just so focused on the numbers and the disclosure, they've actually lost all touch of reality with what financial statements are and how capital markets are. And I think if you look at our most successful 5 CAs that go up into the big leadership positions, they're a bit more broader than just financial statements. And I think that's the point. In terms of the university modules, I think common feedback across the world, it hasn't moved quickly enough. So a lot of people are going to more sort of bespoke type universities. So that's the Singularity University, which is an exponential technology university, again, not really for CAs, but the general consensus is that the accounting or CA route path across the world seems to be outdated.
I know I said that was the last question, but if you have time for one more, I think it sort of links into what you've just said. Someone is asking, would you recommend curious students to pursue a postgrad course in IT? Is this necessary to remain relevant?
Yeah, so as a tech person, I pride myself on trying to look and think about things differently in the world. And look, just my view, I really believe in the next 5 years' time, formal education is not going to be as valued as much as practical experience in the market. So I think, yeah, studying some of these things, they're nice. They give you a good generator or good break point in terms of them. That being said, I could probably do a course online for 24 hours and learn how to build a robot, whereas I could study an honors degree and not know what a robot is. So for me, my preference is for a person rather to get the formal qualifications, which I think corporate South Africa still values. I'd be lying to you if I said, no, studying something wouldn't make you look more attractive to an employer. It would. But I think HR is probably moving towards that space where I think it's going to be more, it's going to be less focused on what your degree was and what your area of study was, but more on what are you capable of doing. And that means, like, if you look at globally, some of the most innovative firms are moving, they've taken away the requirement for a university degree and moved more towards what skills can you do? What type of person are you? How do you react under pressure? So yeah, that's I think the best answer I can give you. Again, maybe to summarize, no harm in studying anything, but I think the market will ultimately judge you on how you do things.
Yeah, Nev, I totally agree. And I think we're slowly starting to see that come into South Africa and the way in which we look at students and their eligibility for a role. So thank you so much for your time. I know you're in Durban on a job and you guys are working hard from the guest house, but we really appreciate you giving up your time and chatting with the students and answering all those great questions that we got. So thank you, students, for asking those. And yeah, Nev, really look forward to chatting with you.
Sorry, one last thing from my side. To all the students out there, please follow me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of content and a lot of articles on different types of technologies and emerging technologies. And yeah, practically everything technology related is on there. And if you do have any questions or you want to have a discussion about anything, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. My details you can find off the back of this. And yeah, I really enjoy this. I'm very passionate about lecturing and teaching to the next generation of students coming through. And it was an absolute pleasure presenting to you today.
Oh, thanks, Nev. And yeah, like Nevellan said, we will email you guys a link to the recording, and we'll also include his LinkedIn profile on there as well, so you can connect with him through that. So thank you so much and have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, students. Bye-bye.